Adolf Hitler. I mean, the name itself just conjures up images of destruction, doesn't it? In just 12 short years, this one man plunged the entire world into its deadliest war and orchestrated a genocide on a scale that's hard to even fathom. He is, without a doubt, one of the most destructive figures in all of modern history.
You know, the historian Ian Kershaw put it pretty bluntly. He called him the embodiment of modern political evil. That's a heavy statement, but it really does frame the sheer gravity of what we're about to dive into. And that really brings us to the biggest question of all, right? How did one man, who started out as a nobody, manage to gain such absolute and terrifying power over one of the most advanced nations on Earth?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to trace his journey right from the start, from a struggling artist to building the Nazi Party, his ruthless seizure of power, the war he unleashed, the genocide he masterminded, and finally, the legacy of complete and utter ruin he left behind. So, let's start at the beginning, because this story, it doesn't begin in some grand hall of power. Nope, it starts in obscurity, where his early life experiences started to shape a truly radical worldview.
He was born back in 1889 in Austria-Hungary, and honestly, his early life was pretty unremarkable. He dreamed of being an artist, but he was rejected, not once, but twice, by Vienna's prestigious Academy of Fine Arts. He ended up living in homeless shelters, and it was there that he was exposed to all this virulent anti-Semitic and German nationalist talk that was swirling around the city. But the real turning point for him was World War I. He served in the German army and served bravely, even earning the Iron Cross. That whole experience just cemented this fervent, intense German patriotism in him.
Okay, so now we get to the period right after the war. For Hitler, Germany's defeat was this profound personal shock, and he walked right into a political climate that was just ripe for exploitation.
And this right here is a crucial point. Many Germans simply could not accept that they had lost. So they clung to this idea called the Dolchstoßlegende, which translates to the stab-in-the-back myth. It was this poisonous belief that the army hadn't really been defeated on the battlefield, but was betrayed from within by politicians, Marxists, and especially by Jewish people. This myth created this deep, simmering well of national anger and humiliation.
So in 1919, while he's still in the army, Hitler gets this assignment to go and infiltrate a tiny fringe political group, the German Workers' Party. But here's the twist. Instead of just spying on them, he joins them. And he quickly discovers he has this raw talent for public speaking, for giving these fiery speeches. He uses that charisma to basically take over this obscure little group and transform it into the Nazi Party. Now, just take a look at these numbers. In 1928, before the Great Depression hits, the Nazis are a political joke. They've got just 2.6% of the vote. But then, look at that jump after the stock market crash in 29. By 1932, they're the biggest party in Germany. It's such a stark reminder of how economic despair can drive millions of people into the arms of an extremist. This brings us to a really critical phase. How Hitler, once he got his foot in the door of power, systematically just dismantled German democracy from the inside out. And the speed of this is just astonishing. In January 1933, conservative politicians, thinking they could control him, convinced the president to make Hitler chancellor. Just 18 months later, he's the undisputed dictator, the Führer. So how did he do it? It was a series of ruthless, perfectly calculated moves. So the first big step comes only a month after he takes office. The Reichstag, the German parliament building, is set on fire. Hitler immediately blames the communists and uses the chaos to get the president to sign the Reichstag fire decree. This emergency order basically just switched off civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, all of it gone, which allowed the Nazis to start arresting their political opponents whenever they wanted. And this was the final nail in the coffin for German democracy. A month later, using intimidation and by arresting anyone who would oppose him, Hitler pushed the Enabling Act through Parliament. This law literally gave him the power to make any law he wanted without anyone's approval. Democracy in Germany was officially dead. And the most chilling part? He did it all under a thin veil of legality. So with total control at home, Hitler starts looking outward. His main foreign policy goal was conquering what he called Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people. And he saw that space primarily in Eastern Europe. And he pursued this with a series of increasingly bold moves.
He marched troops into the Rhineland, a direct violation of the World War I treaty. He annexed Austria, his home country. He took over a part of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland, and then just a few months later, he invaded the rest of the country. And at every single step, the other European powers, just desperate to avoid another war, they did nothing.
But on September 1st, 1939, he finally pushed too far. Hitler invaded Poland. This time, Britain and France actually followed through on their promises, and they declared war on Germany. World War II in Europe had begun.
And now we have to turn to the absolute darkest chapter of the Nazi regime, the Holocaust. And it's so critical to understand this wasn't just some byproduct of the war. It was a central, core belief of Hitler's ideology.
And he made his intentions terrifyingly clear. In a speech he gave before the war even started, he flat out said that a future war would lead to the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. He told everyone exactly what he planned to do.
And under his leadership, the Nazi regime went on to systematically murder approximately 6 million Jewish men, women, and children. That was 2/3 of the entire Jewish population of Europe at the time, just wiped out, in death camps, and ghettos, and mass shootings. And the killing didn't stop there. This was a genocide that was carried out with cold industrial efficiency. When you start to include all the other groups the Nazis targeted, Poles, Soviet prisoners of war, Romani people, the disabled, and many others, the total number of civilians and prisoners deliberately killed by the regime climbs to an estimated 19.3 million. The scale of it is just almost incomprehensible. So let's look at how this all ends, because the very war that Hitler started would be the thing that eventually consumed him and his so-called 1,000-year Reich.
By April of 1945, the war was lost. The Soviet Red Army was just blocks away from his command bunker in the middle of a totally devastated Berlin. And it's there that Adolf Hitler took his own life. The empire he promised would last for a millennium had collapsed in just 12 years. And that really captures his ultimate legacy. He left behind a continent in ashes, and his own country in a state of complete physical and moral collapse. It was a point in time the Germans themselves called Stunde Null, 0 hour. It meant everything had to be rebuilt right from nothing. Today, at the site of the building where he was born in Austria, there's a memorial stone with an inscription. It's a stark, timeless warning that reminds us not just of the millions who died, but of how fragile democracy really is, the dangers of unchecked hatred, and that really sobering question of how an entire society, step by step, can just surrender itself to evil.